Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss. How we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute, but those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alicia.
I'm Ace.
And we are joining you today after missing last week, and you may hear in our voices, we've been a little bit sick, but we felt like it was so important for us to come on today, get back into it, and talk about some really important things that have come up. So excuse our voices. Hopefully we'll be able to get through this. But yeah, I mean, we're in such an interesting time with the elections coming up, and I think everyone's feeling it, the tension, just the dialogues that are happening. I know within my own work, working with clients one-on-one and clinicians, working with clients, it's coming up in sessions, and it's how do we deal with those dialogues about politics, about the political candidates that are coming up for election next month. So we have a lot to get into today. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling it, and if I didn't feel it so necessary to record this episode, then I think we would have punted for another week. But we felt bad about not having an episode last week. We want to be consistent. We want to keep these conversations going. And so many things have been piling up, so many ideas that we have, things that we wanted to address. And so here we are. So we apologize in advance if we're not at the top of our game or if our voices are a little bit off-putting this week or this episode. But we'll do our best, and we'll promise to approach the episode with as much honesty and authenticity as we can. We might as well just get into it. I think we woke up this morning hoping that we would feel better or a little better than we do, if not well. Unfortunately, it's still carrying on with us, and it may have affected our mood a little bit. But we got into it a little bit on LinkedIn. I think you're supposed to have these kind of things going on Twitter or something, but we got into it on LinkedIn. And I just want to preface this, we talk about revolutionary social work so much. Obviously, it's the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. But I just want to make sure that we're, I found myself a little, my heart was elevated. My heart rate was elevated earlier, and I was like being a little reactive in the way that I thought about things. And so I just want to make sure that I am living revolutionary social work values. And I just wanted to clarify that I want to approach this conversation coming in peace. My expectation for the discussion or dialogue is that we can all move a little bit closer together. And it's not about saying, haha, I'm right and you're wrong. Because if either side or if any of the parties said that, then we'd be wrong. And the truth is that the truth is probably somewhere found in between all of us. So if we could talk and come closer together in this, then that would be I would view that as a successful result of these conversations and these dialogues. And that can be hard to sometimes articulate via a short comment on Instagram or on LinkedIn or social media or whatever, right? You can't show emotion. You can't, show much nuance. You only have so many characters. And so we wanted to just approach it from a respectful, empathetic perspective, maybe a lens, and take it from there. But do you want to talk story about it first?
Yeah, I think so, because I think you had seen this earlier on, this post that was talking about Kamala Harris and how she is being dismissed and discounted and considered unqualified, and how this is kind of just perpetuating or the normal experience of Black women in corporate America is that you're trying to get somewhere, to be successful, to do the right thing, and then whatever you do, you continue to be dismissed and to be called unqualified and put down over other people who may not have as much experience or qualifications as you. And I think and you can speak from your side, but what really struck me is that, and someone mentioned in a comment of not to try and hijack the post that's trying to support women like me. And for me, I'm just thinking a post about Kamala Harris is so misguided if it's supposed to be supporting women like me in America. And a lot of our points are, and we've said this on previous episodes, of Kamala Harris has been in an administration which has supported and continues to support a lot of violence, destruction, instability, war, and genocide around the world. And I cannot sit back and just let that be and say, well, she is a Black woman in America and she has this experience and she has certain qualifications. Yeah, I'm just going to ignore the other side of the genocide that's happening and just say, hey, yeah, sure, we should vote for her because she may be better than the other candidate in the other major party. And that also came up in conversation on that dialogue of, we've been playing this game for a very long time of saying, well, this terrible candidate, you have to vote for them because if you don't, it means you're electing the other terrible candidate. And that's not our responsibility. If we keep playing that game over and over again and we stop having any critical dialogue on it, we are just reinforcing the fear-mongering two-party political system that America has. And it's just going to keep going and going and going forever. If we keep saying, well, you have to elect her because then if you don't, you're going to elect Trump. Like, that's ridiculous. And to say, I think the whole idea is saying that you're racist if you don't pick Kamala Harris. I mean, it's just insanity. So there was a lot going on. And like you said, it did make us, it riled us up a little bit. And we both had to check ourselves and think, how are we responding with revolutionary social work values? And for me, it really is, I can't separate the fact that she has supported the war and genocide that's going on today and that has been going on for a very long time, just to say that she's a Black woman and it would be great to have a Black woman president. I can't separate those two things.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously a lot of different angles. And again, I just want to make sure that I try to approach this, with empathy and reflection and trying to bring us closer together and rather than pointing fingers or anything. And so for the gentleman that wrote the post, by all means, he seems like a well-intended man and trying to do the right thing. And so I don't have any criticism of character or anything, where I think it's kind of coming back at us in the other direction, not from the gentleman, but from other folks. In the post, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it went through all of these things, these criticisms, these critiques of Kamala Harris, like, not an open primary, not going on interviews and whatnot enough. And I can't remember everything that was listed, but went through several of these things. And then, basically it's saying that if it's not one thing, it's another. And so essentially it's racism. And I think, I'm not saying that there's no racism involved in anything that goes along with the way people talk about Kamala Harris. I am on Twitter and I see some things, and it's, in some ways, it's worse than I would like to imagine it is, as far as the kinds of things that some people say and whatnot. But on the other hand, all those points that were criticisms were legitimate criticisms, and not all of them have been answered. And just the two that I mentioned, for example, there wasn't an open primary, and that is a legitimate concern. Kamala Harris did not receive any votes in a primary. In fact, she ran before and she got 0. And so, the way that things went down can be talked about further and debated a little bit. But you can't argue that they didn't have an open primary and that nobody cast a primary vote for Kamala Harris. And just prior to that, all the people that are now saying Kamala Harris is so great were saying that Joe Biden was at the top of his game and, that we were being ageist and et cetera,
including Harris herself.
Yeah. And so they tried to dupe us in that regard. And everybody, not everybody, but enough people obviously went and voted. An overwhelming amount of people went and voted for Joe Biden in opposition to anybody else. And he earned the primary in that regard. Kamala Harris did not. Nobody ever casted a vote. So I don't know how you just move on from that. It's a concern that has not been resolved. We don't talk about, but we often hear people talking about the end of democracy. But you can't subvert democracy to prevent democracy from ending. And that's what happened there. No matter how you want to, whatever lens you want to look through, whatever, way you want to interpret it, you can't deny that democracy didn't happen. And so it doesn't really hold much weight for you to threaten to say that if you don't vote for us, then democracy will end, while literally doing that.
I think it's just hypocritical. And to say that the end of democracy is going to happen if you don't vote for the person that did not go through a democratic process, it's insane. And so, but what's even more insane is that we can't talk about it, because if we then bring it up and try and have critical dialogue on it, then we're assumed to be, I mean, the words that kept coming up on that post is just not, it's misguided, and it's not accurate or true. And that's what revolutionary social work is about, is having critical dialogue on these conversations to continue to promote social justice and peace and love and non-violence around the world. And so, no, I won't stop talking about that. Even if this could be the first Black woman president, I will not stop talking about that.
The second point there that I wanted to talk further on was she was criticized for not appearing in interviews and unscripted interviews and whatnot. And that was a valid criticism. She literally wasn't doing unscripted interviews. And she has since then. But the point of discussion here would be if that proved what that proved or what that demonstrated. And I've watched not all of them, but certainly a significant amount of the interviews that she's given. And from my perspective, it didn't settle my doubts about her. And I think a good comparison, honestly, because she went on Fox News, and I wanted to say that is brave for her to go onto Fox News and talk to Brett Baer, and he was confrontational, but she also didn't answer his question. So I see kind of both elements of that, but I do want to acknowledge that that's brave. But it brings me back to, I can't remember what year, but Obama was in office, and the presidents used to do a halftime interview for the Super Bowl every year. And I think that actually stopped with Trump. I think Trump didn't want to do it for whatever reason. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. But the last one that I remember was I was Grandma Obama. We were watching the Super Bowl, and at halftime, Obama was being interviewed by Bill O'Reilly from Fox News. We all know who Bill O'Reilly is, right? And Bill O'Reilly came from the wolf's den. I mean, he came firing, right? And actually the argument after was where I thought he was disrespectful to Obama, and my grandparents were obviously, they weren't about that. And my dad thought that he was he doesn't think that I don't think they should talk to a president that way. Bill O'Reilly came out firing with hard questions, trying to catch Obama in it. And Obama, for all the ways that I criticize him, he was able to answer his questions and fight back and articulate himself in a way that Kamala Harris has never demonstrated to me. I'm serious about that. I don't want to I've not seen her perform by taking questions and be able to respond. There is a difference in what we expect of presidential candidates and how they can perform. And so back to the interviews, yes, she has been doing more interviews, and they've been mixed. Sometimes they've looked a little better than others, but from my perspective, they haven't looked good. So it hasn't alleviated the doubts. It's only grown my concerns.
The thing that comes up in my mind is when you say that, I know that you'll have other people saying that you're saying that because of her race or her gender or both, right? And it has nothing to do with that. But why does that keep coming up? Why is it that you can't just say that this individual is not answering the questions and doesn't seem to be able to stand in front of a journalist and just tell us what her policies are, or tell us what she's going to do for this country? Why does that always have to go back to, well, this is just because she's a Black woman in America? It shouldn't have anything to do with that. And I'm not saying that some people don't have that in the back of their minds, but why does it have to come up in every single conversation?
Well, I even take it further than that. And I think that there are definitely media personalities and others that totally play on people's prejudice and their biases in that regard. And I think the dark side of internet, Twitter, or whatever, I think you see all sorts of stuff. So I don't want to minimize the level of derogatory shit that's going on. My point isn't that racism doesn't exist or sexism doesn't exist towards Kamala Harris. Or my point is that when we use blanket statements like that, and we assume that, or when we talk about folks that criticize her, that it must be racism, it totally discounts anyone that might be not, and it stifles dialogue. If you're unable to talk about or to criticize a person, an individual, a person of color, say a woman of color, without being accused of being racist, then many people will not want to take that battle because they do not want to be affiliated with racism. Why would you? Racism is basically a pejorative in America for a bad person in this day and age. It is, in a sense, like all the masses coming together to stifle any kind of dissent.
I think you make a good point that we're not trying to dismiss any racism and sexism that has happened. But it's stifling the conversation. And so I think that goes on to a big point that we want to make on race, and we've talked about this multiple times, right? That we want to lean more to this unity consciousness, and further away from these racial divides, which we have, as we have said, are so socially constructed. I always go back to that Haile Selassie quote when he's talking to the UN, right? About until
The League of Nations.
Until the color of our skin matters as much as the color of our eyes, there will be no peace. We will not be unified. And this whole conversation that we're having, this political debate, always goes back to those racial divides. Oh, it just keeps going back there. When is it going to be as important as the color of our eyes?
From my perspective, we should reject those labels. I would just break it down in such a way as that, you're considered a Black person. Surely your experiences could be different because of your experience as a Black woman, right? People may treat you differently, all sorts of things, right? Your ancestry and where you're passed down, and the experiences are going to be different. But if I were to meet you in the street or online or wherever, I was to meet you, and I was to see that your skin, and I perceive you as a Black person, it doesn't tell me anything about you.
No.
At all. And so I have this book. I teach a class right now, Human Behavior in the Social Environment, where we're covering lifespan development. The beginning of each chapter moves through the lifespan from pregnancy, child conception and birth to, childhood, all the way to death, right? Well, at the beginning of it, we have 3 case studies for each chapter. So this one on middle childhood. And the first thing they do to describe every single person is use their perceived race. 6-year-old African-American, Jasmine, a Caucasian 9-year-old. And my problem with that is not that race doesn't tell us anything, but when you apply it as a first lens, it tells you nothing, and it only invites you to make assumptions which are racist. Doesn't matter if they're negative, positive. It's racist if you are looking at someone and making an assumption based upon how you perceive their race.
Right, because you could put 5 people that look like me, right? Biracial, standing next to each other. We have all had completely different experiences. So just by looking at us and saying, okay, we're all biracial, it doesn't tell you anything. It tells you absolutely nothing. As you said before, this whole conversation is not to minimize experiences of people. I've had plenty of comments, right, where people have said, oh, you speak so well for a Black person, or is your mum Black or your dad Black? And then when I tell them, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Like all of these ridiculous comments, right, we have to deal with. And so it's not dismissing any of those experiences, but if we just keep perpetuating these racial divisions, we're feeding it. We just keep feeding it. And so that's why we lean towards unity consciousness. Can you give us just a little bit more explanation on that?
Well, I think in the modern day world, right, almost everything that we do and think about is racialized. If you were to go sign up for something, whatever it is, especially if it's for the government, but just about anything, if I was to sign my kid up for gymnastics, they're probably going to ask what race to check a box. And my kids don't even fit cleanly into those categories. And so you're trying to be slotted, and then everybody doesn't fit cleanly. Our kids would be you would be an example. Our kids would be another example, right? So that's the modern day world. Just in our lives together, me and Alicia, we've talked about this, and we've stated that while we understand, cultural differences and differences in experience and all of that, we would like to get away from racializing everything, and especially people. We want to get away from using race as the primary descriptive factor, right?
Right.
And it's so hard. Like whenever I'm talking to Alicia and I'm trying to describe somebody that I met or that I saw, it's really hard for me not to say the Black guy or the white guy. You correct me on it all the time. It's so hard.
Like these are things, just to say again, these things we talk about are things that we are trying to do in our lives, right? It's not saying that we're perfect at this and you need to do this, but we need to have conversation on it.
Yeah, so we're trying to get away from racializing everything from the get-go, okay? And what we're saying is that it's hard. And so in the modern day world, we want to fit everyone into boxes. And I think revolutionary social work values kinship and unity consciousness. When we look at kinship and unity consciousness, it's not that we are not acknowledging that there may be any differences, cultural differences, differences in life experience, differences in ancestry, all sorts of things that could be different about individuals or groups of people. But what it says is that we place our unity and our kinship as human beings and as living beings of the earth above all that. And we recognize that for whatever differences we might have, we have so much more in common and so many more things that could and should unite us, right? And so while I think much like in the modern world, 2024, anti-racism would be a big movement, right? And I think that there's a lot of well-intended things going on, movements, books, discussions, and whatnot. But often it falls into the same category as like when we're talking about Kamala Harris. If you deviate from it at all, then you must be a racist, or you're not getting in line. You're not accepting our education. And I like to describe anti-racism as, like I said, well-intended, but it's like a snake that goes around eating its own tail. We've all seen that before in different contexts, applied differently. But in this case, we're trying to get away from racism, but every single thing that we do, even without the anti-racism movement, but especially when you add the anti-racism movement, everything is racialized, right? So what I'm saying is not that we should ignore all of the differences, more that the deeper truth and the deeper consciousness and the way that we should be trying to connect with each other is as human beings, and that with the realization that if we work together and came together, then the world would be a much better place for you, for me, and for us. And it's pretty simple, and from my perspective.
Yeah, it's so simple. And that's why I think it's so intentional that we're drawn away from that simplicity. I was just talking to Ace this morning about the three values that I see for humanity. If we could all live by: peace, love, and gratitude. If we all live by those three things, peace, love, and gratitude, I mean, just imagine the world. Imagine how different it would be from now. It's just insane to think that we make it so complicated. And I was reading from Braiding Sweetgrass this morning about the Haudenosaunee. How do you say it?
Haudenosaunee.
Thank you. Thanksgiving address. And so when it goes through like gratitude for the birds, the plants, the medicines, grandmother moon, elder brother sun, and it goes through all of these and gives thanks to everyone. And then the last line of each section is, "Now our minds are one." And if we actually lived that unity as giving gratitude to this beautiful Mother Earth that we have around us, and then just because we give gratitude together, our minds are one. We lived that. Can you imagine? It's amazing. And in Braiding Sweetgrass, how she talks about, she asked, and you asked previously, right, if you can use that Thanksgiving address and share it with the world. And they say, of course, we've been waiting centuries to give this out to people. This is a gift that we can give, and we should all be doing it. And it's not something that they want to keep private and keep secret. This idea of unity and gratitude comes from indigenous communities that know that is the way forward and are waiting for us to listen. And we're here like, no, don't culturally appropriate things. No, it's here for us to listen and to live by those values.
Yeah, I think it's going back to the snake eating its tail.
Yeah.
It's like chastising white people. You are doing the wrong thing. You need to do things differently. You're not allowed to do anything differently because you're a white person and you need to stay in your lane. So you think about how that doesn't make any sense. And so obviously there's issues with cultural appropriation and, people making money off Native peoples. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm not dismissing that at all. We have spent most of our life together in Hawaii and Alaska. We've been very conscious of things like that. And
we have a lot more to learn, but yeah, it's something we're very conscious about. And I think that it goes with reggae music too, right? We talk about this, how it's said, oh, reggae music isn't for white people. Bob Marley is not for you. Which is also insane because his whole message was one love. And if you look at multiple reggae artists, they're talking about unity, one love, one people. One of my favorite songs by Natalie Rice, One People. Listen to the message in that. It's for all of us to live these values of love, peace, and gratitude. Isn't that what it's about in unity? I think it's intentional that is not in the mainstream. You don't see these reggae artists up there on the top Billboard 100 or whatever it is. I don't know who's on there, but I know it's not them. And it's because they're spreading this message that would be so simple if we all lived by.
Yeah, and I mean, we had the direct experience, right? When we were in grad school together, there was a situation where it wasn't me they were criticizing, it was somebody else, some other white person, some other lowly melanated person trying to get away from the racializing language. But yeah, they were criticizing them, saying that basically Bob Marley's not for you.
Yeah.
But if you went and listened to Bob Marley's lyrics and what he said, undoubtedly he has an emphasis on blackness and being African. It's obviously undeniable. On the other hand, he was always about bringing everybody together. Like you said, it's one love. If you asked Bob Marley if he would if he would not want white people to listen to his music in the future, I think that he would think that's ridiculous, because how would they be able to get his message and hear what he had to say if they didn't listen to them? I think reggae music is a good place for us to explore the idea that reggae music is not for certain people, or that Bob Marley's not for white people. And we've heard that said before. I don't want to talk too much about it. I just advise people that may think or feel that way to go listen to Bob Marley and listen a little deeper to what he has to say, because that's not the truth. And you don't need me to tell you that. You can go and listen. But before we leave the topic of race and anti-racism and racism, just wanted to point out a few ways that sometimes when we're applying anti-racism and when we're infusing it into people's minds and the way that they think, some of the negative ways that it can come out. And I just want to give you a couple examples, and one that's directly related to reggae music, because I started listening to reggae a long time ago and listening to Bob Marley and listening to people with similar minds. And one thing that you often hear amongst people with that like-minded in those ways is referring to each other as brother or sister, brethren, sisterin, if it was in Jamaica. And so I started applying that. And when I talk to people, I would try to show unity with them by referring to them as my brother or my sister, regardless of race. I did it to everybody. And I came across a tweet. It wasn't directed at me. It was viral, and it's insinuating that when white people call a black person brother, it's just another way of using the N-word. And before I say anything of my thoughts on it, I do want to empathize and say that I could imagine for sure somebody using brother, hey, listen here, brother, trying to use it in a sarcastic way, and that was derogatory and filled with vitriol. I can for sure see that. But think about what that statement is, that a white person calling a black person brother is just the new N-word. I mean, if you just took me, for example, and in my quest for unity consciousness and for brotherhood, me referring to a black person as brother is the exact opposite of. I'm saying I think both could be true in different people, right? Somebody could be sarcastic and call somebody brother, but somebody also might do it out of love and respect. When we make blanket statements like that, even me at the time, I was like thinking, I had these doubts in my mind. Should I not use it? Is somebody going to misinterpret it? My perspective, I have to stick to my values and what I believe in regardless. And if somebody finds that offensive, then I want to respect that they may have had negative experiences or something like that, but that's not for me. And if I call somebody brother or sister, I'm doing it as a sense of unity, and I'm trying to show that that's how I view you, and that's how I would like to move forward in this world, is together. I think that we all should be coming together as brothers and sisters. And sometimes by just assuming that the other side is so bad, we overlook their humanity and the commonalities that we do have.
And we're not perfect with that either, right? We're trying to get to this stance of the unity consciousness and one people, and the human race being the utmost of importance, because as a human race, we're here on the planet together. And if we can come to that now, our minds are one, even if we all have different experiences, and it's not discounting any of that based on our racial composition, our heritage. But why can't we bring that all together and still live as one people in one love with peace and gratitude? I don't know. It probably sounds so woo-woo to a lot of people, but it seems so simple again. It really does, if we can live that way. And I think that idea of calling someone brother or sister, it brings us together as a community, as one people, regardless of where you come from and what race you identify as, what gender you identify as. Brother and sister, it's that we're in this together. We are fellow human beings. That's been really important for me with this whole political debate and election season, is thinking that fellow humans all around the world, how can we get to a point where we are taking care of each other? And that's where it leads me to think that the candidates we have right now are not pursuing that. And so that's why we keep talking about it. But
well, you said, regardless of where you're from, which brings me to another instance. And this one is more complicated, and we'll have to dive a little bit deeper than the other one. Why don't you start it off and talk about it from your perspective? The whole thing we want to talk about is, let's say you get out of the airport, wherever you're traveling to, and you get in a taxi, and the taxi driver asks you where you're from.
And we've heard from multiple people, and I've had this experience of, as a person of color, that question, where are you from, is often racially driven. And if I've answered it in the past, I have a British accent. And so if I'm in America, for example, and then someone says, where are you from? And I've said, oh, the UK, the Channel Islands in the UK. I'm like, oh no, where are you from? Like, where's your family from? And I've had that come up a lot of times. And there's different parts to look at from this, because some people may just genuinely be interested in where my heritage is from. And okay, I'm this woman of color from the UK, and my family, I have heritage in Jamaica, heritage in England, African ancestry, and so someone may just genuinely be interested in that. Then when it comes with further questions on, oh, is your mom or your dad Black? And then answering that and someone saying, that makes sense, because they're making an assumption that if my mum was Black, then I would somehow be different. I've definitely been in the experiences of it's been racially driven and negatively racially driven, having racist ideas and making assumptions based on those racist ideas about me as a person. I've had that experience. But do you want to touch on kind of the larger idea that we've been talking about?
Yeah, and I mean, first off, I want to acknowledge that I agree and believe everything that you said. So on one hand, that could be kind of weaponized. You're being racialized. Exactly what we're talking against. These people are not being able to slot you where you're supposed to be slotted. And so it's confusing them. I want to acknowledge that sometimes it could be even more full of vitriol. Somebody might be, no, where are you really from? Like they could say it in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I also have experiences in taxis as a white guy. And I will say here in this very place, Anchorage, Alaska, it's been a while since this has happened to me. I haven't spent time in taxis, but this was even before Uber, right? So everyone used taxis around here in Anchorage. I used to travel through here all the time. I don't want to put a percentage on it, but enough times, at least 5 times, I would say, I've been picked up by white taxi drivers who had assumed because I was white that they could drop racist jokes while I was in the back. And it's very uncomfortable because what do you do? Is it a time to stand up and fight? Is it a time to ignore it and get the hell out of there? There's no easy way. But that's one way that I can say that I know from my side of things that kind of shit happens, even for sure that they happen based on the way that people perceive me as a white person, won't react or will think it's funny when they make jokes about the natives or something like that. I believe you is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. My point would be that we shouldn't just assume someone's intent. And I often hear this made again as a blanket statement, right, that we know what you really want when you ask that or what you really want to know. But I just want to present an alternative situation. And somebody is a taxi driver. It's tourist season. They pick people up from the airport, often folks that are traveling. They notice somebody has not an American accent, whether that's an Irish accent, a British accent, an Australian accent, or even maybe an African or Asian accent that they don't quite understand where it is from. And so they are curious, which in my perspective, from my point of view, curiosity is an excellent way to gain unity consciousness and kinship. Because if you're curious about another person, rather than making racialized assumptions, you want to know more about them. You want to come closer together. I'm respecting who you are and want to know more about it and willing to listen to you, right? Let's say I was your taxi driver and you got in and I noticed you were from somewhere else and I was really excited to get to know more about you because I wanted to know you. And that's a genuinely heartfelt, positive, unity consciousness, kinship type of connection. And I just don't want other people to go and when somebody asks them who they're or where they're from, to automatically assume that it is done with ill intent, because it is not always done in ill intent. Both things can exist at the same time. And when we make these blanket statements, then what we do is we imprint in other people's consciousness, a kind of fear to talk about things. And so would you really want the curious taxi driver that wanted to get to know everyone better, and do you want them to be afraid to ask everyone where they're from? It doesn't make sense. That's a common logical question if you have someone who wanted to know more about them. I would only be able to be a taxi driver if I had those kind of conversations. Otherwise, it would be terrible for me.
Yeah, making those connections. Yeah, and I agree. I think when we come from that curiosity standpoint and we're making connections with our fellow humans, again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I think the problem is that we live in a world that continues to push those racial divides and push those racist ideas and assumptions. And so we do have some of those experiences that then are driven by that. Right? So the more and more that we can have these conversations and have critical dialogue and talk about unity consciousness and kinship, I think the more and more comfortable experiences we will have as all people of all colors and backgrounds to just have those curious conversations. Because you're right, I've had plenty of conversations where I have, in the back of my mind, I've thought from past experiences, why are they asking this? But then when I can see and I can feel that energy is very kind of like non-judgmental and more curious and wanting to connect, and we have such great conversations. And I get to talk about the little island I'm from, Guernsey, and then I also get to talk about my experience having Jamaican heritage, and they are valuable conversations to have, right? I think once we lean more that way into just kinship and one people, one love, then we can have more of those conversations. And so I think it's important for us to say, as revolutionary social workers, is to just try and our own experiences are valid. They are so valid and they're real. To move forward as revolutionary social workers, we also need to just take a breath, reflect, and think, is this person also coming from that standpoint? Or are they coming from that curiosity and they're trying to connect? And so it's hard sometimes, but I would say more often than not, we can tell when someone's energy is with love and humanity and not with those negative assumptions.
Yeah, you said everything very beautifully. And I think to wrap up this conversation a little bit, I would just say that that's my perspective, is that we should value other people's different experiences and the differences, culturally, whatever life experience. But as much as we can, we should refrain from making any assumptions about other people based on what we perceive their race is, because it doesn't tell us anything. With more info, it might give us more context, but at its base level, it doesn't tell us anything. When somebody tries to label me as like white progressive or something like that, I don't fit cleanly into that box at all. Like placing basically a pre-created caricature of what that means onto me when it's not accurate.
We are working towards a world for us, for social work, for our children, for humanity, where we don't have to be so concerned about these assumptions and these racist ideas, and we're not tied to these racial divisions, and it's just normal and natural for us to live in community with each other as one people. And yeah, that's our hope.
To shift gears a little bit, actually, I can return back to our conversations on LinkedIn this morning. And one of the criticisms that we received were that we were hijacking the post, which I can empathize with. You do something and you've got it going, and there was a lot of comments on there. But also that we were talking about separate issues because we kept bringing up Gaza, and that's not what they were talking about. And it really brings me to such a larger concern of where we're at. You always hear the people reflecting, or I was alive during the Holocaust, or if I was alive during slavery, or if I was alive during this, I wouldn't have done that. I would have been different, and I would have spoken up. But I mean, it's happening right before our eyes. And I have more empathy with people that would have not done anything during the Holocaust because they didn't have the internet to watch the videos in real time. But a terrible thing is happening right now. A terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And I see a presidential candidate. I see both of the presidential candidates, but this one in particular, Kamala Harris, has said, as recently as yesterday, her team clarified that despite her having empathy with the people of Gaza, she has zero intention of changing anything as far as policy when it comes to supporting Israel with money and weapons. And where I stand is, as that this close to the election, I don't know how you can talk about Kamala Harris without talking about that.
Right.
The election is right around the corner. One of the worst things in our lifetime is happening right before our eyes. It's not hard to go find videos and pictures that should blow your mind. And so when you talk about that they're separate issues and we're conflating them, or we should keep them separate, would you have said that during the Holocaust or during slavery if somebody brought up, say, an abolitionist came to you and they said, here to talk about ending the slave camp that's going over there, where they're like, nah, look, you didn't understand. This meeting is about whatever it is about, so we don't want to talk about that. You'd be disgusted with that person historically.
You would.
I mean, I don't know what I can do for Israel and Gaza. And we talked about even holding Harris accountable, but I really can't hold Kamala Harris accountable. But I can hold social workers accountable. That's my profession. That's where I have a podcast. I'm a professor of social work. I've read and thought about things related to social work for decades now. And if there's anything that I can do, it's continuously point out that you cannot separate Kamala Harris from what's happening over there and her, in her own words, quote, unequivocal support for Israel. It's not a separate issue. It's impossible to separate.
You can't separate those two things. And someone said on there to me that just because she's wrong on this, that doesn't disqualify her as a candidate. And I guess this is up to everyone's opinion, but to me, to be wrong on an issue as important and serious as genocide, of killing so many people around the world, there's victims on both sides. There's victims everywhere. There's so much war happening right now under this administration. Yes, to me, that does, in my mind, make her unqualified to then be the next president, because I'm assuming that that's going to continue. These sort of things are going to continue. And so, like you said, we have to, no, we can't really hold her accountable, but we can hold ourselves accountable. And I can guarantee our children will probably ask us in years' time, in a decade's time, what did you do when all that was happening? And I better be able to stand there in front of them and say, we talked about it. And we had critical dialogue on it, and we spoke out, and we advocated for those people that are dying every single day. You can't separate those two things. You just cannot separate it. And our responsibility to continue having that dialogue as revolutionary social workers, and to bring it on posts like that in LinkedIn, because if you're going to bring up Kamala Harris, how can we not bring up this genocide that's happening?
Yeah, and to tie it deeper to social work, right? The problem is not that any social workers support Kamala Harris. You should make your own judgment and whatever you can, and we're all at different levels of knowledge and consciousness in our life experience. So our beef wouldn't be that individuals choose to support Kamala Harris. But if you were to enter into the social work discourse, and by this I mean go to an NASW, look at social work as organizations and individuals, their presence on social media, or anywhere that you want to look that social workers are talking about things. Do you know what you can find? You can find t-shirts. You can buy t-shirts to support Kamala Harris. You can find lots of posts that romanticize her and make her into something that she's not. Do you know what you can't find? People talking critical about it from a social work perspective. As social workers, you can't find it. And so we're not very balanced, are we?
No, we're not. We're really not. And I think another big thing is when, like you say, anyone, you can vote for whoever you feel the need to vote for, but you have to be able to engage in these critical dialogues to then be able to stand by your vote. And if I was to vote for Kamala Harris, I'm not just voting for her, I'm voting for the people that donate to her, because then she is now tied to those people who have given millions and millions of dollars. And we see that with all the politicians. It's same with Trump, it's same with Biden, it's same with Obama, it's the same with all of them. They are tied to these donors, big donors, who control things behind the scenes.
Let's look at things just from a little bit of a different perspective. Let's imagine that Kamala Harris goes and she does an interview with whoever it is. I don't care if it's friendly or foe or whatever, okay? And she does a job that is not perfect, but not the worst ever. You would never be able to find out that information if you followed political pundits or people that talk about it online. You would get one of two things. Kamala Harris's interview was a train wreck disaster. She demonstrated that she's an incompetent DEI fool, basically, is what you would get on one side. And on the other side, you would get that she just did a wonderful job and she just demonstrated exactly who the person that she is, and she's totally great and totally proves that she's fit to lead us. The problem is that neither of those things are true. And so nobody is speaking the truth. As Americans, as political pundits, as social workers, as individuals, we're not speaking the truth. It's not a football game. We're either cheering for the 49ers or the Raiders. It's not. It's the presidential election of what some perceive to be the most powerful country in the history of the world. That country is terrorizing other parts of the world right now. Essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that it's impossible to have any real dialogue about these situations if she's either the devil or an angel, and there could be nowhere in between. And you could apply the exact same thing to Donald Trump. He's either God's greatest gift that never misses a putt and never messes up at anything, or he's a terrible criminal that's going to impose Hitler-esque stuff on the world. But I hate to break it to you, but the genocidal shit is already going on. Both parties support it. There's neither of them deviate from it. If anything, they criticize each other for not doing enough.
Exactly. And this angel and devil thing, this or that, I think as social workers, we need to be really careful that whenever we're in social work spaces, we're also not making these assumptions that you're either this or either that. And because that completely, I think, one, it makes people fearful to actually engage in critical dialogue and talk about things that are non-partisan. People are afraid to do that, right? It just cuts off all dialogue. And as fellow social workers, be kind to each other, to your brothers and sisters, and allow for that non-partisan conversation to happen in social work spaces. It's not happening enough. And I know for myself, it can be uncomfortable when it comes up. But if we don't talk about it, then this is just going to keep going, this whole cycle of this or that, this fear-mongering two-party political system.
Yeah, and we got to move on. But the last thing that I want to say about this regard is the NASW's endorsement of Kamala Harris. I think a lot of bothers me is the context that it's presented to us. So I would be more open to the endorsement if they were honest about it, meaning they wrote an open, critical article where they said, while we understand that Kamala Harris is not perfect by any means, and while we promise to relentlessly push her on issues such as the war in Gaza and funding and arming Israel, but we still think that it's important for us to endorse her against Donald Trump because we're so worried about it. It doesn't say that. The way they endorse her, it's the angel thing. She's an angel who will come and save us all, and she's perfect. And that's why we should vote for her. That doesn't really inform social workers. It's just partisan. It's just saying the same thing that the Democrats would say about themselves. And so that's my point on it. I wish that we could have a little bit more of a critical conversation. But the NASW, the National Association of Social Workers, in my opinion, it starts with you because you're the one that is framing it in such a way. Where individuals do a podcast that, maybe a couple thousand people watch, whereas the NASW has access to millions of people and they have a responsibility and they should be honest about it and they should be critical about it. And that's all I have to say about that.
Once again, having critical dialogue. It is key. It is so key to revolutionary social work.
Well, before we move on from Kamala Harris, this is true for Trump. I don't think it's true. It is true for Trump as well. The idea of you can look where the money comes from to learn a lot more about where a candidate's real interests might be. I think a better comparison would be between Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders. I'm not going to go through all the data right now, but basically, if you look at the data, Bernie Sanders had a much higher percentage of small contributions, under $200, whereas 70+% of Kamala Harris's donations are from big donors. And we looked up the top organizations that donate to Kamala Harris, and the truth is that they're all just really big money, some more nefarious than others, but it's basically super millionaires and billionaires that are funding her campaign. I know that some people will argue on the other side of this, but I think that history is very clear. All you have to do is follow the money and you'll see exactly where a candidate's allegiance lies. Why would they give the money to the candidate if they didn't think that they would do their bidding? And if it's billionaires bidding, well, it might be a newsflash, but it's probably not in the best interest of everybody else if the billionaires are the ones that are calling those shots and have that influence. And I would go so far as to say that if we were to imagine a Kamala Harris administration, it would be full of people of color, but it would also be more people.
And when I kind of was looking down this list, a lot of it is big ties to military and continuing to promote war and to fund the defense budgets. And so that's what's going to continue to happen. So you can say it's these things are separate. We can't keep bringing in this genocide that's happening, but it's going to continue to happen if you look was donated to her campaign. And when I also look down, I want to say that there were a few that were very focused on climate change and the environment.
You got to look deeper though.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just throwing labels on them and assuming because they're in those areas. I'm telling you, you need to look deeper. So let's talk about Trump real quick for just a minute, because much of what Donald Trump says is absolute drivel, in my opinion. And I got into this thing where I thought he was sounding a little bit more reasonable a few months ago. And ever since then, he's proven me wrong further than I could ever imagine. And Trump's full of nonsense. But I always say this, just because someone lies and is full of nonsense all the time doesn't mean that they never tell the truth. And I want to take us back to, Chappelle made fun of this once on Saturday Night Live, or so. Take you back to when Trump was debating Hillary Clinton back in 2015, 2016, whatever. She called him out for not paying taxes, or he said, yeah, you're right, and I do that because I'm smart. Why would I pay taxes if I don't have to? The government makes the rules and the loopholes, and I just do what I can within those. I think that, the left often dismisses that kind of thing, and that everybody heard that, and they were like, oh, we've never heard anybody talk like that. You know what I'm saying? Because most people are distrustful of the government. And when you go out into the world, especially, streets, people are distrustful of the government. Government showing up to help you is not a good thing. He said that. And he said the truth. And I think that same thing, what he said, can be applied in Israel. And if we're really honest about it, the reason why we fund the world with weapons over and over and over and over and over again is because people in power have investments in the companies that make the weapons. It's very simple. We give money to Israel, but Israel donates a lot of money to political candidates. So an ongoing flow
Money laundering
of funds, right? And so when you look at Kamala Harris's stance on Israel, and you look at all these people that are donating and that are tied to the military-industrial complex and tied to politicians that have investments, and you can see that Kamala Harris is not going to do anything about the war or about what's happening because it's literally the people that are funding her, that is going to allow her to be elected.
Right.
Otherwise, she would not be able to be elected if all these people, these groups that have all these ties. My point is that it's obvious. Follow the flow of funds. These things aren't going to change. It has everything to do with the people that are paying for Kamala Harris.
Right.
Go follow the money.
And that's why it's insane to just keep going back to, well, if you don't support Kamala Harris, you're racist, you're sexist. When supporting Kamala Harris is so much more than just her. It's supporting all of these donors that want to keep funding the war. And so, yes, we are going to keep talking about it. No, we cannot separate these two issues. They're being critical, and we have to keep being critical. And we encourage you all to be critical about this, because if you follow that money, you will see what the next 4 years will look like.
You will. Go look at the list and then imagine what the Kamala Harris administration would look like.
And same with Trump. Let's not discount that. Look at the money there. Then you'll see what the next 4 years will look like. This is not this angel versus devil. We're in a really dire situation right now where we have two candidates who are going to continue this war, and we can't just sit back and not talk about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get away from politics completely, I wanted to bring up someone who we've talked about on several different episodes, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK. And we've talked about him basically under the context of that we are very interested in what he's talking about regarding health, make America healthy again, calling out food companies for the dyes and for other things that are poisoning us, food that we're eating from day to day and making Americans sick, causing cancer, chronic health problems, etc. We've also reflected that we are unsure about him. We don't know what his motives are. Why would you join Trump? It's just very interesting and in a way kind of perplexing. And so those are the two contexts that we've talked about him in. But I just wanted to reflect and give him credit for is that I have seen people that I would have never imagined. Like I saw some clip of Glenn Beck of all people. Glenn Beck, the guy who was too outrageous for Fox News, and back when Fox News was even more outrageous. Anyways, I saw him talking about it and he was like doing some, showing how much sugar is in a Coca-Cola or in a Frappuccino or something like that. And I'm like, these people would never have been talking about this if it weren't for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And obviously Glenn Beck is no ally of mine, but I also think that it can be harmful when we ignore people that are doing the right thing, even if we disagree in other ways. And so I just wanted to give credit where the people that are now talking about health is in the food that we're eating and the way that the food companies are manipulating us and hoodwinking us and poisoning us. I don't care which side of the aisle you fall on or who you are, what your background is. Much credit to you if you're speaking up to these issues. It's a very hard thing to do. People are so resistant to it. I feel like just talking about the soda thing that a lot of people want to lock me up in a cage and never let me speak again, or maybe in something darker than a cage, a cell, so that I can't talk about it.
Yeah, people have very strong feelings about not drinking soda. But I think you're right. This speaks to, if we put things out there and we talk about these things, and someone with as much power as RFK has talks about health and talks about the poison in our food, and then we keep talking about it, things will eventually change. But if we just shut up about it and don't, it's going to remain exactly the same. And I think, we've also been perplexed on RFK's views on Israel and Gaza, which obviously we don't support the continuation of that war. So he's a very confusing individual in this political sphere. But yes, on health, it's incredible that it's actually now being talked about. And I've seen multiple videos of showing differences in the foods that are in America and the cereals that are in America and the cereals that are in Canada or the UK, and the amounts of poison that we have in the ones in America. Why is that? Why are we not talking about it? Why are we allowing our kids to eat it? Why are we allowing ourselves to eat it?
Very well said, Alicia. And I think, we're getting on time. We're not feeling well. Our brains are starting to, go to sleep on us and let us know that they're not working like we would like them to be. And our kids need our attention. So we're going to have to get off of here soon. But I thought we could shift this a little bit more and frame it as social workers. We have a lot of things coming up. Foremost would be the election, right? And it causes a lot of stress. We have family members that you have to interact with that don't see the same way as you do, that are confrontational. We might be all amped up about certain things. Also have Halloween coming up. We've got Thanksgiving and we've got Christmas. It's the holiday seasons for the mainstream part of the United States of America anyways. And I think in all of those things, the election, the holidays, they can all come with challenges for us. And so I just wanted to think as social workers, what are some things that we can do as revolutionary social workers to make sure we're taking care of ourselves during these times? If we're feeling stressed out around the election or around the holidays, there's some things that we can do to take care of ourselves. And I think that there are multiple angles involved. I think one side could be what we were talking about regarding health and eating. It can be a hard time. Not there's lots of candy coming from Halloween, right? Or kids are expected to go and get loads and loads of mainstream candy bars that are passed out on Halloween. Thanksgiving and Christmas, obviously, traditionally at least, come with a lot of eating, some of it healthy, some of it not so healthy. So one, how do we take care of ourselves in that regard? And then how do we take care of ourselves mentally, both for the folks that may be stressed out about the election? They could be worried about the results. They could be worried about interactions with family. They could be worried about policies that will be enacted or not enacted by the people that are elected, as well as the holidays, right? Folks can be stressed out mentally, emotionally, spiritually, from everything from being stressed, from not being able to buy your kids the presents that the world expects you to buy for them, to, maybe you're challenged ideologically and you're working through what it all means to you. Maybe you have stressful familial relationships that you are worried about. To turn it over to our professional, expert, licensed clinical therapist, Alicia, what can we do to take care of ourselves?
I'm glad you brought that up, because this actually came up in one of my case consult groups at work. And I just reminded everybody that we have to think about our nutrition. What are we putting in our body? What are we drinking? Enough water? Just like these basic needs that are going to keep ourselves healthy and our brain functioning and our bodily functions moving. Those basic needs we have to remember. But also how much social media and news are we absorbing every single day? And we have to think about this too. If we're on social media all the time, and it's not natural for us to just be intaking all of this information within seconds. Think about if you watch like Reels and you just swipe through, thinking about in 5 minutes how much information you've just downloaded. So really being mindful of how much of that we're doing. I think thinking about our morning as well, setting ourselves up, not waking up and then going and looking at Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, but waking up and doing something nourishing for yourself, so then you can show up for yourself and for the world. And as a social worker, for me, that personally is a yoga practice, and being able to get on my mat and move and breathe and meditate. It then sets me up to go into my day, and I can respond hopefully a little bit better than maybe I would have if I hadn't done that. So put these things in the circle of self as well, right? Being able to move our bodies, being able to use our breath, have moments of stillness where we're not absorbing information and not in conversation with others all day long, that we are in conversation with ourselves. And if you have a higher power, a higher energy, being able to connect with that as well. I think it's really important that we nourish ourselves, that we take time for ourselves, and we set up a morning routine. I would say it starts our day off. It sets the energy for the day. And so if you can think of ways that you could maybe in the morning just have a little bit more distance between social media and the news before your day gets started.
Yeah, thank you. What about the importance of community? Obviously a goal of ours to level up our sense of community as we move forward. But we have community in our house, right? We have 5 individuals total. So everybody in this family has 4 other people that show them love and kindness, give them attention all the time, every day of our lives. Not everybody has that. And I think even to my old self, I was living in Barrow, Alaska, where it was cold and dark during holiday season. Sometimes I was all alone much of the time. And I empathize with that person for the folks that don't have the community that they need. And I think that things have even escalated over, the last decade or so. Since that time I was alone in Barrow, in the sense that things have moved so much online beforehand. Or even think about students. They may be taking a completely online, asynchronous program where they never meet with anyone. A lot of people are working from home. Don't you think community is super important, especially in this, this day and age?
I think community is huge, and it is a key element of the circle of self. And you're right, not everybody has that naturally around them, especially with the remote work and the online world now these days. Some people's community may be highly tied to the internet. I think we just have to be careful of what kind of energy those environments are giving us. So you can have community on the internet, but does it give you energy? Does it drain your energy? I think thinking about it that way is important as well. Being in community with animals too, pets, nature, being outside, being in community with the natural world, going on a walk, even if you're connecting with people that you would call friends, but if you're around other people and there's just a smile to each other, being in community with our neighbors, right? Little ways like that. And I think you're right. We have to be kind to everybody that may not have those other people in their households or someone they could just pick up the phone to. But I think also, just thinking about that, you've mentioned this, is picking up the phone, talking to people that we may have not talked to for a while. So an old friend, give them a call. Family member, give them a call. Maybe preface it with, this call is all about love and peace, and we're not going to talk about politics in this next few months. But yeah, connecting with people that way.
Sometimes, we might not call somebody because we're afraid that they're going to bring up politics.
Yeah.
And I think you can employ a variety of strategies. I've had this come up several times, and I just kind of listen and try to move forward somewhere into another direction or something like that. One thing that I've learned is that you're not going to allow politics to divide me from other individuals in my family or from other people. I look for ways that can bring us closer together and unite. So that would be my encouragement, to call the person, even if politics might come up, and just try to subtly move away from it and talk about things like you said, love and kindness. So I think sometimes if you preface the way that you said, and might kind of scare people off, you might want to do more be a little bit more subtle with that.
Know your audience. Definitely know your audience. But I think that comes up in the back of my mind, and I'm trying to implement that more and more these days, is when I go in uncomfortable situations or I'm talking to someone that I think it might get a little tense, is in the back of my mind, if I can keep love, peace, and gratitude in some way, if that informs how I respond to the situation, then I think it leads me down a much better path than like the anxiety and the fear and the division, So yeah, maybe not say it outright if that's not your audience, but keep it in the back of your mind.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to wrap things up here. We're going overtime with sick and some responsibilities that we have. And just wanted to say that, if you're listening to this and you would say to yourself, I would love to talk more about these things and get closer. I would love to share my perspective with you all. That's what we're all about. So I would encourage you to reach out to us if you would like to talk further about any of these issues. We're totally open-minded. Matter of fact, the communications director of the NASW recently reached out very kindly and respectfully and said they would like to come on and talk about the differences in our viewpoints and hopefully come closer together. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. And you can look forward to that conversation coming in the future. And if you would like to be a part of any of these, please just reach out to us. You can hit us up at consciousparty@gmail.com.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe to our channel. Hopefully we won't be sick again and we can keep these consistent episodes coming out. But yeah, we love having these dialogues together, and we would love to have, more people that are watching it. And we're really excited to be able to talk to NASW. And yes, we have differing opinions, but this is what it's all about, is engaging in this dialogue. And hopefully by the end of that conversation, we can hold hands and say, now our minds are one. Not even that we agree completely, but on these bigger issues, perhaps we can come to, a little bit more unity.
And something else to look forward to is that we've got in the works ideas to provide opportunities for dialogue, for talking circles, for social workers. I think, like the NASW and other entities often focus on continuing education units, CEUs. And there's often not a lot of opportunities for us to dialogue with each other. And around a lot of these issues that we've been talking about, like even on LinkedIn, and it would be great if we could have those conversations in a circle, even if it was a virtual circle or a collection of circles, because just to plant that seed for you. And if you would ever like to participate in dialogue around issues related to social work, especially from a revolutionary social work lens, even if you don't know what that means, we would love to talk with you. And so keep a lookout for those. And Alicia, it's been great. Another great episode.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ace. So we will see you next time for episode 8.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.